Hello everyone, my name is Jax. Welcome to Outdoor School Anywhere. Today we are going to learn the ins and outs of recycling. To start, we're going to go ahead and gather our materials. Here's the stuff you're going to need for today's activity. So we're going to be making a collage. So anything like magazines or pictures or cool colored paper, then some glue and scissors. Cardstock's really great for collages. And then pen, pencil, markers, crayons, anything to design it however you would like. You could also use a digital platform to design a tracking map. And there's also an access to this link to the Metro Recycling website. So go ahead and pause this video, take some time and gather your supplies, and then we'll get started. So what does this symbol mean to you? Let's take a second to think about that. You can pause and take however much time you need. So this is the universal recycling symbol. A brief history of the symbol, as said on Wikipedia, is that there's a worldwide attention of environmental issues that led to the first Earth Day in 1970. That was like almost 50 years, or just over 50 years ago. The Container Corporation of America, which is a large producer of recycled paperboard, sponsored a contest for an art design students at high schools and colleges across the country to raise awareness on environmental issues. It was won by someone named Gary Anderson. He was then a 23-year-old college student at the University of Southern California, whose entry was the image, now known as the universal recycling symbol, this one right here with the 3 arrows. So when we look at recycling, we think about the 3 R's of recycling. Many of us have heard of these 3 R's, and they are going to be reduce, reuse, and recycle, as we can see on this image. What does each R mean to you? A lot of the times we can personalize what these R's mean to us and how they affect our daily lives. So I want you to take a second, pause the video, and think about what does each of the R means to you. So the first 2 are pretty self-explanatory. Reduce is the amount of something you use. And then you can otherwise, for reuse, you can find other ways to reuse something after its initial use. So we see as reduce as like we can take something that we don't need to use as much and reduce our use of that. So sort of like if you were to have a water bottle. But that's also the same in reusing. So I reuse my water bottle every day. But if we look at maybe if we get like a jar of like pasta sauce, we can reuse that jar at home. Now, when it comes to recycling, this one can be a bit more tricky because it requires a little bit more of an explanation. So we're going to learn about what we can recycle, what we can't recycle today, if there's any specific regulations that go into recycling. So let's go ahead and get started with that. So what are major recyclable materials? We have paper, that's one of them. We have metal, we have plastic, and we have glass. So all these different types of materials are going to take different steps to recycling. And we're going to take a look at what those steps are so we can make sure that we're recycling properly, because if we aren't recycling properly, then those things can't be recycled. They have to go to the trash. So where do raw materials come from? So those are going to be all the different items that we looked at before. So we're going to take into consideration and think for a moment about where those items came from in the first place. So pause this video. Where do the materials required to make paper and cardboard come from? These are going to be trees, other plants, and bamboo. Those are going to be the most popular or most common way that papers and cardboard are made. So we see trees everywhere. Bamboo, maybe not as much, but definitely in the Pacific Northwest, trees are everywhere, and that's a huge way that paper's made. Then take a second to pause. Where do the plastic used bottles, jugs, and containers come from? Most plastics are made from 3 raw materials. This can be, the first is petroleum, which is right here. And this is a non-renewable natural resource. So it sort of means that it doesn't get remade as easily, but it is natural. We also have coal, which is also a non-renewable natural resource. So again, it's not going to get remade as fast as possible. It doesn't recycle itself within the system or reuse itself. Then we have cellulose, which is renewable and it's a natural resource. So that means we can keep making it, and it's going to keep making itself. Metal. Where does the metal come from that we find in our metal products? Let's pause and take a second to think. So there are tons of metals used to make the products we use. This includes aluminum. That's a fun word to say. I encourage you all to try and save it to yourself. Aluminum and iron. But in general, metals come from these things called ores found within minerals, like this bauxite, which should be the next pictures within the Earth's crust. So these are mineral ores right here. And these are extracted in a process called smelting before they can be made into metal products. So here is an image of smelting. So it's getting melted down. So it's really, really, really hot. It kind of looks like lava. And then it turns into aluminum. Isn't that kind of crazy that it goes from this rock-looking mineral to then being melted down, smelting, and then turning into aluminum? A nice can. And then the last one is, what is glass made from and how is it produced? Go ahead and pause this video and take a second to think. So there's two main components in glass. There's a couple different materials that glass can be made out of, and there's three of them. So it's sand, lime, which is a mineral, and then soda, sodium carbonate. So essentially these materials are going to be melted under intense heat, and when they cool, they become glass. So there's a ton of awesome videos out there of people who are making glass, so I highly encourage you to look those up because it's really cool stuff. So with that, let's do a little quiz. Okay, we're going to go ahead and do a quiz. So paper, what do we think? Can you recycle this? Take a second to think. And yes, paper is one of the most common items recycled in the world. It's kind of like the easier, like, oh yes, I know I can recycle paper. In 2017, 65.8% of paper was recovered for recycling. So that's awesome because we can reuse paper over and over again. Okay, what about this used pizza box? What do you think? Can we recycle this used pizza box? It's made out of cardboard, but you actually cannot because this cardboard is too greasy to be recycled. So if there's any remainder of food within something we're trying to recycle, it becomes contaminated. So it should actually be composted or trashed. Because there's the food, it's not able to be recycled. What about these frozen food boxes? Those are also they're boxes, so it would kind of make sense for them to be recycled, but we actually cannot recycle these frozen food boxes. So the reason for this is because these boxes are coated in plastic coating on them to protect the foods in the cold, so they can't be recycled because of that. And then our last one, what about these cans? Do we think we can recycle these cans? Go ahead and take a second to think. So yes, you can recycle these cans. As long as they're clean, aluminum and most other metals are recyclable at the curb. So that's why we always want to make sure that when we finish drinking a LaCroix or a Pepsi, that we rinse it out before we recycle it to make sure it's clean. And then also, as some of you may know, beverage containers, like some of the ones pictured here, are able to be returned for deposit money in Oregon and some other states too. So that's always a nice way to earn a little money and then also treat the earth well. Now we are going to talk about some plastic recycling tips. So here is what types of plastics can be recycled at the curb. We have plastic bottles, jugs, and jars. Example, like a milk jug or a soap bottle, shampoo bottle. We also have round plastic containers like salsa and hummus, sort of like these ones right here. And then the plastic nursery containers for plants, but just make sure that you wash out any soil. And then we also have plastic buckets, like a bucket. It's pretty straightforward, just like this bucket right back here in the picture. However, there are also certain items that cannot be recycled at the curb. And these are going to be bags, like plastic baggies, but you can always return them to the grocery store or reuse them when you go to the grocery store. There's these lids, or drinks, cups and straws. We have food trays, lids, styrofoam. So we always want to see before we get rid of any of these supplies, we want to see if there's any way that we can think of reusing them. So why not? Let me see, hold on. Bags and lids are bad for sorting machines. The lids are just too small, and the bags will jam up the machines, which wastes time and resources, and that raises the cost for everyone, not only the people who are breaking down these materials, but also us as people who live in these communities, because if we were to put the money into recycling these, it would cost more money for us. Then as far as cups, straws, and food containers, they're too soiled, even after cleaning, to be recycled properly, too contaminated, sort of like what we were talking about earlier, and making sure that like those pizza boxes aren't recyclable because they're contaminated. It's the same type of deal. Our food imparts oils into the plastic, and that's makes them poor quality to be recycled into new materials. So let's learn about glass. Is glass recyclable? What do you think? Yes, glass of all colors is very recyclable. All glass is 100% recyclable. However, there are precautions and steps we have to take when recycling to make sure that we're being safe as well. Separate glass as broken glass is bad for when the system mixes with other stuff. And it's also dangerous to us if we were to be working with broken glass. So always make sure that we're working with an adult. And then only jars and stuff like that are recyclable at the curb. So there's glass like light bulbs, window glass, drinking glass, or vases are not recyclable at the curb. With an understanding of what materials can be recycled, it's time to turn our attention to how these materials are recycled. And that's going to bring us into our field work. So today's our field work will require scientific research. Research is super important in science because it allows us to back up our hypotheses and the ideas that we think on why something is a certain way. So today, scientists will be able to identify what materials are actually recyclable in our neighborhoods, understand the difference between open and closed loop recycling, create a visual representation of the recycling process required for one specific item. With an understanding of what things are recyclable, we are going to do a bit more detective work to look at what the process of recycling looks like. So we're going to have each one of you choose an item to follow throughout the recycling process. So that could be anything of what we talked today that was recyclable. After researching your particular item, you can get started on a visual representation of what your recycling item goes through. This is a great time to get creative. That's part of the fun with science, is that we can mix science and then also a creative side as well. So feel free to use any type of collage material and create a digital version or create a digital version of a map tracking and explaining what happens to your item along the way. And make sure to include labels as needed. So with that, everyone, that is the end of our presentation today. I appreciated having all of you here, and thank you for coming. I hope you enjoyed this and learned a little bit more about recycling and are ready to take on the world recycling properly. Have a great rest of your day, and thank you.